Please join me in welcoming Melanie Cheung.
Thank you so much. Before we start, you might have noticed there's like a little piece of canvas on your chair. It's going to be for the art activity at the end. I'm just going to also pass out some oil pastels and pencil crayons. Basically, you can just take like 2 to 3, any colors you want. You don't have to overthink it. It's just going to be a fun little intuitive activity. And you can just keep passing those out while I talk. And yeah, so we're just going to dive right in. Also, if you don't want to participate in the art activity, you definitely don't have to. It's not going to be like super messy. It's really just oil pastels, which is why there's paper towel as well. But don't feel obliged. Just if you want to, it'll be fun. So first of all, thank you for being here. Hi. My name's Melanie Cheung, and thanks for the introduction, Alicia. Also, I really just appreciate you coming out and spending your Thursday evening with me. I know that the weather is kind of conducive to some couch lounging, so I appreciate that you're here hanging out with me. As Alicia mentioned, I'm an abstract artist based in Hamilton. And this is my second time giving an artist talk. I will be honest that public speaking does not come naturally to me. But doing things that scare me has kind of become a theme in my art journey. So these aren't really like monumental, scary things, just like little personal mountains that I've climbed over time. And you're going to see this theme pop up throughout this talk as well. So first, a disclaimer. I am going to be I'm going to be going through kind of my journey into becoming an artist and giving some practical tips, but this is not a motivational speech. But maybe you might find something relatable or inspiring or motivating from this talk. Also, I consider myself to be in the very early stages of art career. So I'm really just a baby artist is what I consider myself to be. I only really started creating art in any kind of professional capacity in around 2021. But I do believe that there's value in sharing kind of from this in-between place where I'm still figuring things out and figuring them out really in real time. And while abstract art and selling art professionally is still relatively new to me, I've really been creating and making things for my entire life. So here's a little outline of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. So first, developing a consistent practice, doing things that scare you, as I mentioned. I'm also going to bring you into my personal studio practice and how I am going about finding my artistic style. I'm going to talk about taking the leap into the art world and exhibiting my work. And then a little bit more about my background. As Alicia mentioned, I started as a fashion designer, and now I'm really focused on art, but I'm also juggling multiple creative jobs also. Also a section that I am calling the art business paradox, which is just the idea that as artists who are trying to sell our work, kind of trying to make a living, but also making art that feels true to you and how that can kind of be a bit of a paradox sometimes. Then I'll touch on where I'm headed next and a little art activity at the end, and then we'll do a question and answer period. Okay, so developing a consistent practice and doing things that scare you. So my art journey hasn't really been linear. I grew up drawing and painting with my grandpa, who is a very talented painter and artist, kind of on more of a hobbyist level, but very talented. I studied fashion design in university, and then I worked in fashion for about 12 years, where illustration and sketching were a big part of my schooling. And I also taught myself graphic design through a bunch of online courses. So that's also a part of my life. I've dabbled in painting, drawing, but painting has always felt like a bit of a mysterious practice to me, but also a very sacred practice. So I would kind of pick it up in spurts of time and then stop for years at a time. So these are some examples of things I made before I began this current art journey. I kind of would always dabble in drawing and painting. Fashion was my background, so I was a lot more drawn to kind of figurative work. I never really attempted abstract painting until 2021. And then during the pandemic, like a lot of fellow introverts, I suddenly had space to just be. And aside from, all of the terrible things that were happening and people getting sick, I actually felt a bit of a relief from the pandemic and just having that time and space to breathe. I moved from Montreal to Hamilton, and just found myself ruminating a lot. So I began following a bunch of artists on Instagram and watching a lot of their practices and their techniques. And really, the more and more I kind of followed their practices, I felt like I really feel like I need to be doing this. And so for me, it started with a really small request for a painting from a friend of mine. I was sort of dabbling in things, trying to figure out what was next after my fashion career. So I was dabbling a little bit in interior design. And a friend of mine was like, oh, I would really love an abstract painting for my apartment, but I can't really afford an original piece. So I was like, let me try and make something for you. So I made one piece and that kind of grew into a larger series. But that first series, although I really enjoyed doing it, I was really kind of focused on the technique and the aesthetic and the look, but I wasn't really putting what felt like me or an emotional value into the work. And so after I did that little series, I felt like, okay, now is the time that I really want to figure out what my style is and who I am as an artist and what am I trying to say with my art. So I created a little studio zone kind of in the corner of my bedroom. I was working at the time full-time as a textile designer from home. So this little corner bedroom studio for me was a really nice little escape. And I learned how to stretch canvases on YouTube. Something that I had always wanted to do for years, but kind of just kept putting off because it seemed really intimidating. And then this little act of learning something new really just kind of gave me the momentum to keep learning and doing more. So I just kept stretching canvases and practicing and kind of looking up techniques online. And back to the topic of creating a consistent art practice. So for me specifically, consistency and routine are very, very difficult for me. But as an artist, I know that showing up in your studio and having a consistent routine is very essential. So I just wanted to share a few little tips on how I manage that while I'm not really a routine person. So for me, working from home at the beginning meant that I was always in my studio, especially waking up, and it was literally in my bedroom. So I was always there. So it was just staring at me and I couldn't really escape it. So that was handy at the time. Also, my process is very layered and slow. So rather than working for hours at a time on a painting, I'll kind of work on something and then let the layers dry and come back to it over time. Also, abstract painting, I realized, felt a lot more freeing and less frustrating for me than figurative work. So I was actually motivated to keep going and not stopping painting for chunks of time. Also, sharing on Instagram, though this can be stressful, I also have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Instagram and social media, I'm sure, as we all do. But it really keeps me accountable. And I try and share as much of the process as I can. And I love having conversations with other artists that way. And it's also nice to kind of feel like there are other eyes on your work, especially when you're just working from home. Also having deadlines. So whether it's applying to open studio or whether it's applying to art show calls, open calls, exhibitions, art fairs, all of those things kind of keep me on track with actual tangible projects that I need to be working on and deadlines. Also, I really enjoy my process. So it really just feels fun and satisfying and de-stressing to paint. So that also just keeps me motivated to keep working. I now have a dedicated studio, and I really do like kind of just being able to get out of the house. I also like being able to get as messy as I want to be and then close the door at the end of the day. So that motivates me to keep working as well. And most crucially is that I allow myself time to rest. I don't really feel guilty for having periods of rest, because for me, those kind of downtime moments are really essential and are actually a part of the work for me. So, introspection, wandering around galleries, just not painting and not drawing are always moments where I'm like thinking about new ideas and are kind of just like critical to my work as well. Okay. So back on the topic of doing scary things, like I said, when I mean doing scary things, what I really mean is just breaking up little goals of things that I want to do that I may be putting off due to fear. So these are some photos of some of the scary things that I've done on my list. So stretching my own canvases, posting my work online, making a website, showing my work publicly, applying to the artist project art fair and then exhibiting there, eventually leaving a full-time job. Also, a big one for me was getting over a fear of driving, which was a big fear of mine. And this was really practical because it allows me to now drive my artwork to art shows. Another one was spending money on an art studio outside of my house. This felt like a really big investment, but I've definitely seen my practice evolve from spending this money. Shipping paintings internationally. You can see my very supportive partner there building a crate. We shipped that painting to London, England, and it was a very daunting, kind of scary process, but now I feel confident that I can do it again. And then doing an artist talk. Here we are today. I've done one previously. Again, I agreed to do this talk, and then I knew as the date approached, I'd be like, oh, I'm getting nervous, but I'm very happy to do it. And I feel like the more I do these types of things, the more easy they become the next time. So for me, I'm in my late 30s. So I would advise anyone kind of in their late 30s or beyond that I would encourage you to try small things that stretch you. And for me, art has been a fantastic way to do these little scary things. And just to get myself out of my comfort zone, especially I think as we get older, we kind of just stay in our comfort zone. So for me, art has been a really great way of, taking those little steps and trying new things at a time when like maybe I wouldn't have been trying scary things. So now we're going to do a little deep dive into my studio practice. So as I mentioned, after I did that first little series of paintings for my friend, my goal became, how can I express my truest self through my art? And this is a challenging place to get to. I kind of have to try to block out all of the noisy thoughts of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, worries about what other people might think, worries about what might sell, what might not. And the only way that I've found I can get to that really authentic place of painting is by just making a bunch of work, experimenting a lot, trying out ideas, messing up, making a mess, and just surrendering to the process. So it's really just about making as much work as possible and really enjoying the process and not worrying so much about the outcome. Listening to music is a big part of my process also. I listen to a lot of kind of like introspective, cinematic sounding music because I find it really helps me get into that frame of mind. I'm someone who listens to a lot of podcasts, but I find I reserve that for when I'm stretching canvases or when I'm priming canvases. And when I'm actually painting, I make sure that I'm actually listening to music because I just find it goes hand in hand with my practice. So in terms of finding my personal style, I just put together a little timeline of kind of how my style has evolved since I really dove into abstract painting. So in 2021, you can see that was that little series that I worked on, and it was very textured, more neutral. I was definitely sort of playing into a bit of an interior design style that I liked. From there, I realized that I really just wanted to be expressing myself through art rather than necessarily trying to stick with any kind of trend. And I realized how central color is to my self-expression. So in 2022, I did a series of more colorful paintings, and then kind of evolved into some abstract landscape paintings. And then 2023, that's where I first exhibited at Artist Project. And I really started playing with these sort of like transparent washes of paint and incorporating a lot more color into my work. And for me, my style is something I really hope that I'll keep evolving over time. I'm not someone who can really just like paint the same thing over and over again. And I really hope that my style continues to change. So I wouldn't say that I've necessarily found my style yet, but I do always want my art to kind of exist into this like little universe of paintings that I've created. And also, sometimes I am conscious that I have to kind of rein myself in because I have a lot of ideas and I have to give myself time to actually just explore the current idea before moving on to the next thing. So yeah, that's just a little timeline of my style. And then 2024, 2025, this is kind of the style that I've been painting in now since the beginning of last year. And I'm at the point now where I'd like to start incorporating in back some of the styles I experimented with early on and sort of like mixing all of those things together. And one through line with my paintings is I often start with just simple graphite marks. And those for me represent subconscious thoughts. I really try and make those marks without anything in mind. And from there, I build layers. I used to really overplan my paintings. Like I would actually sketch them out in Photoshop digitally first and then try to replicate those. But I realized that was just a way of me trying to control my work, and it was actually kind of working against me. So now I really focus on intuition and letting go of control, embracing imperfection. And for me, that's so important because painting really helps me process my emotions and distinguish between anxiety and intuition. I also am jotting down thoughts and phrases on my phone constantly, and those thoughts, phrases, ideas end up becoming the titles and themes of my work. So, as I was mentioning art and emotions, painting helps me process the life around me and manage anxiety. So that's something that I've struggled with since I was a young child. And I'm also just really fascinated by the human mind in general and what quietly lives inside of us. So memories, dreams, fear, joy, grief, sometimes those things can coexist at the same time. And that's really what I'm trying to express through my painting. And also just examine those emotions in a way that is hard to sometimes put into words. So a huge breakthrough for me in finding my style really came from experimenting with heavily watered down acrylic paint. And I first actually learned about this technique from a contemporary painter. Her name's Heather Day, as you can see there. And then I learned about Helen Frankenthaler, who really pioneered this technique in the 1950s. She was a very prolific abstract expressionist and color field painter. And so her method was called the soak stain method. And this is really what I'm doing today in my work. Through these artists, I really learned that painting could be about play and about focusing on the process and not the end result. And I felt like they really gave me permission to paint in a free and childlike way, in a way that I just didn't really know was allowed before. So I love to paint on raw cotton and linen. Sometimes I prime it with clear gesso. Actually, the little swatches you guys have are primed with clear gesso. I mix my paints with a lot of water, and I really try to let the paint guide me. So those little so-called mistakes are what I find really brings the work to life. And it's really trying to not let myself over control the work that makes me, in the end, find the work more successful. And yeah, when I'm painting, my aim is really to get to a place of creating like I did as a child, which was a place where there was no judgment or feeling precious about the work. And it was really all about discovery. I really love raw materials, and I really want them to always show in my paintings. And I strive for an imperfect, organic feel to it. And I really want it to be obvious that my work was made by hand. So I like to show all of those moments. I mentioned a little bit about how I started out more with a neutral palette and then realized that color was so important to me. And so these are some scenes from my studio practice. I always mix my own colors. I'll always have like a whole bunch of containers of pre-mixed acrylic paint. And then from there, I take empty containers and I'll take a little bit of the paint, mix it with water, and that's what I paint with. It's usually chaotic like this. Like, it's the only way I know how to work is super messily. So it's nice that I have the space to do that now. And even though I'm using color, the reason why I'm always mixing my own colors is that I just want sort of a quiet aspect to even like a really rich color. I always want there to be a muted feeling, something that feels a little bit more quiet or natural. I usually mix a good amount of like complementary hues with each other so that I can kind of achieve that. So it's just sort of mutes everything down a little bit. And then recently I have been experimenting with adding sewn panels into my paintings. So you can see on the far end, those are some studies that I first did a few years ago. And then in the center, I started experimenting with sewing raw cotton and raw linen together and then painting over top of that. And then more recently, I have been deconstructing paintings and painting on loose panels and then stitching them back together. So those are these two paintings on this side. So it really kind of just feels like a nice marriage of my background in fashion design and sewing and my new abstract art journey. So taking the leap into exhibiting. So the more I created work, the more I felt like maybe I wanted to actually start sharing it. So as I said, I started on Instagram, I made a website. This was still very much kind of in my comfort zone. I didn't really know anybody in the art world or have any connections of other artists. And I generally felt pretty intimidated by it. So I kind of just thought, I'm probably just going to share my work online. I'm not really going to go to art shows or anything like that. But that really changed. I soon realized how amazing the art community is, especially in Hamilton and Dundas. And while there are like so many different art worlds, the one I've kind of stumbled into, I find is so friendly and encouraging. And there are so many art shows going on all the time. And I kind of just started first online connecting with some local artists, mostly on Instagram, and then eventually meeting up with some of them at shows. I also have two little anecdotes that kind of stick out in my mind. And they're both about Tanya Lecaria, who you probably all know. She's a fellow abstract artist. So you probably all know her. She's super encouraging, really like champion for artists. And I went to one of my very first art shows it was at the back of Farside at the B-Side Gallery. And this was like very early on when I started painting, and I had met her a couple of times, and she was introducing me to another artist, and the other artist asked me if I was an artist, and I said, "Oh, I don't know, sort of." And Tanya said, "What do you mean? Like, you make art? Of course you're an artist." And so just that little like moment, she probably wouldn't remember it, but it was very pivotal for me because I just realized that, I've always been creating art, and I don't have to feel like calling myself an artist is like an outrageous thing to do. And so now I kind of take that into conversations I have with people, because I find that that's quite often I'll have a conversation with people who are artists and they are hesitant to call themselves artists. And I've just really come to realize that if you create art, or even if you just think about creating art, if you make it for yourself, even that, and being an artist is really something that just lives in your very being and isn't about being a professional or anything like that. I did eventually start exhibiting my work. And so my first exhibition was at a friend's pop-up shop in Toronto. She had asked me to exhibit a collection of paintings that I was working on after a trip to California. And this was like my first real series of work that I felt really like true to myself with. And she was showcasing her soaps and candles in a beautiful space in Toronto and wanted to fill it with art. So I pulled together a collection of paintings, and that was the first time I exhibited my abstract art in public. So that's the top two images there. And then I also, around the same time, I don't really know why, decided that I would apply to the Artist Project in Toronto, which is a big art fair there, just to see if I could get in. And then I have another Tanya story. It's too bad she's not here tonight. But so basically when I ended up applying and getting into the Artist Project. I was really hesitant to accept the offer because the cost to exhibit there is a really large sum of money. It felt truly astronomical. I couldn't even believe it. And also because I had only ever done this one little show before. And I had met up with Tanya, and she said to me, and I was saying, I probably won't do it, like maybe next year. And she said, well, it's really not an easy show to get into. I think you should just go for it. So I did go for it in the end. And it really was like a game changer for me in terms of an actual professional art career. And then that same year, I also showed at the Back Alley Gallery. I got into the AGH art sale, which I hadn't gotten into previously. I ended up exhibiting my work at Mulberry Cafe, at Paul Elia's gallery at the Square Yard Show, and then also at one of my favorite spots in the city, Synonym. So that was just a whirlwind of jumping right into exhibiting all within a year. And then just 2 weeks ago, I exhibited for my third year in a row at the Artist Project in Toronto. And exhibiting really isn't essential to being an artist. But for me, I found that it brought me a real sense of community and also collectors. I actually learned how to present my work professionally. And maybe even more importantly, I learned how to talk about my art from a place of honesty and vulnerability. And some early advice that I got when I started getting into exhibiting was to be selective about where you exhibit. And while I do mostly agree with this, like, for example, I would only show in a place that I find resonates with me. I also just feel like I want to get my art in front of people. So whether that's at a coffee shop or a physiotherapy clinic or gallery, which are all places I've now shown my work, I really just want my art to be where people are. So I try not to be that precious about where I'm exhibiting also. And so these are some images from the art fairs that I've done. I exhibited at the Artist Project in Toronto for 3 years, as I mentioned. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a massive 4-day art fair at the exhibition place in Toronto, featuring over 250 independent artists. It's a really incredible show. It is expensive to exhibit there, but I do believe it's really pushed my career kind of to another level, and as well as my own personal growth. The fair helped me grow confidence, make connections, and also sell my work to a whole new audience. I've connected with interior designers, gallerists, art consultants, and directly with collectors. And so setting up for an art fair is a huge undertaking. It involves creating a new body of work, designing a booth, packing all of the paintings, transporting them to the fair, installing the artwork, and then being ready to be on your feet for usually 4 days to talk about the work, to talk to people, and to essentially be selling your work. So as much as talking about myself and my work doesn't really come naturally to me, I really have learned to kind of enjoy those conversations. And it's been really nice to hear how other people connect to my work. Last September, I also took part in an art fair in Detroit. That's at the top. And I went to that as a collaboration with two friends. So Amy, in the middle of that photo, is a really talented curator and friend, and that's Shay Chang, who's a really amazing artist. So we did sort of a group exhibition at the art fair in Detroit, which was really also a lovely experience to get to do it as a group, and just also opening myself up to a whole new market. That was the first time I exhibited outside of Canada. Okay, so I'm going to touch quickly on just like a little bit more on my background and how I transitioned into art. I've always wanted to be an artist, but like many kids of immigrants or first generation parents, I was kind of told it wasn't a viable path, or that art should really be reserved as a hobby. And so I probably should have gone to art school, but I set myself on a new path, knowing that I really needed to do something creative. I convinced my dad that I could study fashion design instead. And I felt that, and that would be like a more practical career path, which is kind of funny because it's not that practical of a career path. But I kind of saw more of a path there than I did with art. So I went to university in Toronto for fashion design. These are some of my school projects that I did, and then as well as some images of a little knitwear brand that I started soon after graduating. And then, right after I graduated university, I got a job right away designing for Le Chateau. You might remember that company. So I moved to Montreal. And then I worked in the fashion industry for over a decade for various companies. It was always a corporate job, working long hours, on the computer for the most part, sometimes flying around in private jets. But the more I worked in that industry, the more I really just got disillusioned, and I missed the days of fashion school where I was actually making things with my hands. So on the side, I would dabble in jewelry making, knitwear, painting, and I was always just trying to make something. And then it wasn't until 2020 when I lost my job during a pandemic layoff. But that was actually kind of the push that I needed. And my partner and I moved to Hamilton. As I mentioned, I started painting in a small way out of my bedroom. And once I started painting, I kept making those little goals for myself. And also, to be clear, even if I wasn't pursuing art in any kind of professional way, I definitely would still be making art, because during that time, I just really realized how essential art making is for me. So now, today, I'm a full-time freelancer. So art is a really big part of what I do. I also do graphic design work. When I moved to Hamilton, I started out working remotely full-time as a textile designer. And as I mentioned, I painted on the side. I also took on some graphic design projects and began selling my paintings online. So after a year working for that home textiles company, I decided to leave that job and focus solely on art as well as graphic design. So this has definitely not been an easy path. The feast or famine idea is definitely very real in freelancing. But it's also the most free I've felt in years. I no longer dread Mondays, which has been huge for my anxiety. And I now work out of a rented art studio where I spend a lot of time working alone, which I really enjoy. But I also have the option of chatting with my fellow artist studio mates, some of whom are here. I tend to thrive with having a lot on the go at once. But managing multiple projects is definitely a challenge for me. So I actually use a project management tool that's meant for big teams, but I really just use it for myself to keep track of all of my projects and deadlines. Okay, so then I just want to touch a little bit on this like art business paradox that I was talking about. So the very first time I sold a painting to a stranger, meaning someone who wasn't in my family or a friend, I really couldn't believe it. So this is the painting here, and that's the painting in their space. I was so grateful they wanted my art that I almost wanted to give it to them for free, but I didn't. I sold the piece for a price tag that I couldn't even fathom at the time. And putting a price tag on your work is tricky enough as it is. And then creating art that feels authentic and heartfelt while trying not to think about the outcome of selling the work is another challenge. And making art that feels important and not hollow, that will gain the respect of gallerists, curators, fellow artists, and also that someone wants to hang above their couch. It all kind of feels like a lot to wrap your head around. And there's also a bit of a sentiment in some art worlds that like we shouldn't care about sales, or that we shouldn't want people to hang our art in their homes. Like it should be beneath us or something. But then we also desperately want them to buy our art and hang it in their homes. So they're kind of just conflicting feelings that I'm always grappling with and still haven't quite figured out. But these are just a few tips that I've given myself that maybe you can take away too. So one is that so much time, energy, thought, physical labor goes into the art that you make, and people really do want to buy into that. They're not only buying a physical item, but they're also buying into the emotional energy it brings them and that you've put into the piece. And putting a price tag seems high can be difficult to put that on your work, but there's also just so much more tangible and intangible value in your work. So the price should really be reflective of that. Having someone hang my art in their personal space, I've come to really think of as such an honor. It's not something that I take lightly. Our homes have become our sanctuaries and the space where, people have all of their most intimate moments. So if someone wants to live with one of my pieces forever in that space, I really think of it as like such a special honor. And then number 3 is really just trying to tune out all of the noise. So even if my goal is selling art, ultimately I've got to tap into the things that feel most meaningful to me and like paint from that place. People want to buy art that feels authentic and that comes from your little unique universe that you've created. So if you're trying to appeal to what they want and to what's selling, I do believe this will show up in the work and will actually work against you. So finally, I just wanted to share some books that have been helpful for me. The Artist's Way, I was like almost a little bit embarrassed to put on here. But it's been one of the most helpful books for me, I have to say. There are some sort of like woo-woo spiritual things in there. And if that's not your thing, if you can kind of just look past that, or maybe it is your thing, but if it's not, if you can look past that and just go through the exercises, I really did that at the beginning of my art journey. It's like a multi-week program that you can do, and it's all self-guided. So I highly recommend that. The Smartest Guide was really good, practical advice from the people who created Create magazine. Navigating the art world is really kind of just demystifying a lot of the things about the art world for people who are starting out. Ninth Street Women is an amazing book that I'm actually rereading right now. And it's just all about kind of the early women abstract expressionist painters. And then Get the Picture, I highly recommend. It's about a woman who went undercover in the New York art scene. And she kind of just talks about she kind of is revealing all of the like absurdities and also amazing things about the New York art scene. Finally, I just want to talk about what's next for me. So I'm still very much figuring things out. I really want to keep evolving with my process, as I mentioned, and my style. I want to keep playing around with mixed media. and experimenting with larger scale works. I've also made the decision that I'm not going to exhibit at the artist project this next year. And instead, I'm going to put that energy into applying for more open calls, making relationships with galleries, maybe doing a residency. That would be cool. And really just seeing where things take me. I'd love to have a solo show in the near future, which I haven't really officially done. So that's probably the next scary thing on the list. And then I'm taking part in June in a really nice group show in Toronto with 4 other amazing women artists. And so that's coming up at Gagné Contemporary Projects, which is in the East End. And I'm also looking forward to hopefully opening up my studio space again. We did a really great open studio recently. That was a huge success. So we're hoping to do another one in the near future. That's really all. I have my information on the screen. And I also have a little mailing list sign up if anyone wants to join my mailing list. So that's all for my talk. Next, what we're going to do is a little art activity. So you don't have to be nervous. It's going to be really intuitive, easy, no pressure. The whole idea of it is to not put pressure on yourself and to release any judgment. So, actually, I guess did we pass out the pastels already? Oh, we did. Okay. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some music. It's going to be 2 songs, about 4 minutes in total. So it's going to be really quick. What I want you to do is just draw whatever you want. It doesn't have to be abstract. It can be absolutely anything, but not judge yourself. Don't go into it with any preconceived ideas or judgments, or try to even just turn your brain off and don't judge yourself at all. Basically, just listen to the music, draw whatever you want. It can be squiggles, it can be figurative things, it could be literally anything you want. And then what's going to happen once all of those pieces are done at the end, I'll collect them. Unless anyone wants to hang on to them, you can. But I'm going to collect them and I'm actually going to stitch them all together, add a little bit of painting to it, and make a stretch like a collaborative painting that hopefully we'll be able to auction off at the DVSA auction or some sort of auction in the near future. So does anybody have any questions before we do that? Okay, so everyone has their art making tools? Okay, so hopefully this is still hooked up. I'm just going to play some music. It's going to be about 4 minutes, and I'll let you know when we're at like a 1 minute mark. But again, no pressure. Just draw whatever you want. And then when the question period goes, if you still want to be drawing, you can also do that at the same time. So any questions?
Can I make a comment instead of a question?
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Oh,
that was so good, Mel.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Thank
good
you.
to hear. Like, I mean, I know you and I know your work, but just all the history of everything and how the fashion, and the progression. You've only been working in such a short time. It's so impressive. It's so amazing and inspiring what you've done. And really, the two that what? You know what I mean? And even your style and your passion and your exploration and the evolution. It's just fantastic.
Thank you. I mean, I have only been painting in this style for a short period of time, but I did a lot of random things in my career life. Like, I had a jewelry label for a while. I had a knitwear company. I was always I had all these different projects, and I always kind of felt like, oh, maybe I've just wasted my time working on all these different things. But now everything I've done has helped me now in what I'm doing. So it kind of makes all of those little projects feel worthwhile. So even though it's been a short period of time, I think I've been preparing for it through all of those little things that seemed disjointed before. Yeah.
How do you choose your colors?
So I will say, like, I don't really know, like, they kind of come from within me, but then I guess they are based on things that I am seeing subconsciously and don't really realize, or that I'm drawn to. So like my last series, which you can see behind me, I only really realized when I was exhibiting the paintings that those colors really came from like my view at the Westinghouse studio, because I'm looking at like all of those rusted old buildings and flames and smoke and the sky. And so I'm just staring at that all the time. Nancy knows I'm obsessed with the view. So, yeah, so it's just like kind of things that I'm observing and taking in on a subconscious level. And then it's like I just really get obsessed with a certain color palette. And then I do refine it. Like I'll kind of lay it all out on the computer and try and see what colors go nicely together, and then start mixing the paints. Yes.
How do you know when an individual piece is finished?
So one thing that I've kind of built into my work is that I allow myself to overdo it a little bit, because I tend to do that. Like it's hard for me to just stop a painting. So my work is quite layered, even though it looks soft, because I keep adding to it always. And I've sort of made that a bit of part of my process, where like I'll let a piece sit and then I'll decide to add more to it like 2 weeks later, or I'll decide with these ones, I decided to cut them up and sew them back together. So I guess I know it's done when it no longer bothers me, because otherwise they're just kind of bothering me always. And just like, it's almost like they're speaking to me saying like something, there's just something. So once I feel kind of at peace with it, that's when it's done. But I do allow myself to kind of like overdo it. And I've kind of made that a part of my style.
What made you stop going to the artist project or decide not to continue?
I think for me, well, it's a huge undertaking. It's just so much prep involved and so much work involved. And this year's show, it was a good show. Like it was a success for me, but I kind of felt like I wasn't really growing in the way that I was last year or the year before. Like it kind of felt like I'm doing it again and having similar experiences that I had the years prior. So it's not that I'm not going to do it again. I definitely think I'll do it in a few years again, but I just really feel like the need for a bit of a break. Also just to kind of work on my style and evolve my own style to make sure I'm making work that still feels like true to myself. And then also because it takes up such a big chunk of my time, like I mentioned, kind of the other areas I want to focus on, I'll hopefully have some time freed up to actually do more of that. So, yeah.
Do you have any residencies in mind?
No, really have to start looking into that, but I like the idea of a residency. So that's as far as I've gotten so far. But somewhere in Europe would be awesome, but also like local residencies would be nice as well. So we'll see. I got to do a bit more researching.
Yeah. I don't know what's the question on, but the life of the artist now is creating. But it's also, as you articulated, it's promoting yourself, going to shows, getting yourself ready. So talk to me about like how you compartmentalize that aspect of creating and then taking that hat off and then doing the other activities that comes with being an artist.
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff I enjoy doing when it's like a little bit more design oriented, if I'm like making things for my website or social media, but then the things like accounting and just like keeping myself organized, I don't really enjoy. But I think, like I said, I take really long breaks. Like I work kind of like crazy for big chunks of time, and then I take breaks in between painting and drawing. So it's usually during that downtime that I'm like, okay, now I have to get myself organized. I do all the kind of like admin stuff. And then that project management tool that I use, I put all those tasks in there too with deadlines. So it's called Asana if anyone wants to use it. That's kind of how I keep on top of those things, even when I don't really want to do all of those tasks. Did that answer it?
Melanie, when you were showing your progression, even back in 2020 when you started, there's always this kind of ghostly, atmospheric, ethereal kind of feel to your work, and sometimes it's shape, sometimes it's landscapes. Like, what's drawing you to work that way? What do you think is the pull for you to do that?
I don't know. I think it's just sort of that emotional feeling that I'm trying to convey. And when I really first started painting, I didn't know that I was trying to convey that. I was more just trying to figure out what a painting from me would look like at its truest form. So really, like I said, it's kind of just experimenting, but I really love all of the kind of like playing with color bleeds and sort of like hazy transitions. I think I'm just drawn to that sort of aesthetically anyway. So, and then there's also because I know I'm kind of a messy person in the way that I create art, I could never do like really hard line or really detailed, precise work. So I've also just built that into my practice where I'm like, colors are allowed to bleed into each other. Effects that you don't necessarily want to happen with your paint is kind of where like the interest lies for me. So I'm also like, I try and use nice materials, but I'm also not that precious about my materials. I'll kind of use whatever paint I have on hand and see kind of how it dries interestingly. I really like sort of like weathered finishes to things. So it's really come through experimentation, but yeah, I think the ghostly kind of aspect for me really signifies or kind of represents that emotional inner landscape, I guess.
Is that where you feel you're starting from? It's all coming from the inside?
Yeah, like I think when I first started painting, I was like thinking that I had to be painting from a place other than that. Like there had to be more to it. But then I realized I'm the type of person who's always ruminating in my head and very like introspective, and like maybe that could be what the work is about, and that's really what I've leaned into.
I have a question. I can go again unless someone else has.
Oh, there's someone after you behind.
Go ahead. Okay. Can I ask a practical kind of question about gallery representation? Like, are you actively looking for a gallery that suits you, that you connect with, or are they coming to you, or is it a bit of both? Are there galleries that you're like pursuing yourself?
Yeah.
Or are you just sort of not waiting, but like hope? Well, of course, hoping.
Yeah.
Someone knocks on your door. Like, how does all that?
Well, it's still something I'm navigating. So far, like I exhibit work through the AGH, and that happened through getting into the sale. And then I actually just asked them if they'd be interested in representing me year round, and they said yes. So that's been really great. And then I show with other online galleries. They actually came to me, which was really awesome. Tacit Collective, I've been showing with since they've like I have my work online with them, I should say. And that's since they've really started. I met her through Instagram. And then the other online gallery, which is called Art Match, I think that he found me at Artist Project and then reached out to me. There are definitely galleries that are like on my radar, and I would like to work more with galleries. And I don't always know if it's like, I don't really know how to approach them. I think sometimes galleries have open calls. And it's also maybe about just like forming a relationship with the gallery and having that conversation over time. But it's a bit of a mysterious process for me still too. I've spoken with a couple gallerists at Artist Project because a lot of them are going around and trying to like see if there's new people they want to take on. So I now kind of am in contact with a few of those, and I kind of want to push those conversations further. And then there's like the really like top tier galleries, which I really don't know how to get into those. That part is a bit mysterious to me. So yeah, not entirely sure there.
I feel like this is like a dumb question, and I teach, and I'm like, there's no dumb question.
No, there's no dumb question.
I guess it's like, it was interesting to me when you showed like some of that early painting and drawing that you were doing. And like you obviously have the rendering skills, and like those great, this too.
Thank you.
And I know like sometimes people feel like you shouldn't make abstract art until you prove that you can draw in a realistic way.
Yeah.
And I'm just, as you were talking, I was kind of mulling that over, and I'm just wondering how, because it seems to me like I don't think you would be doing the work that you're doing if you didn't have that experience.
I don't think you have to know how to draw in a realistic way, because to me, abstract painting is like using a completely different part of your brain. I still love figurative work. And for me, I feel the need lately to just do a little bit of that because I haven't like exercised that part of my brain in a long time. But I really think that for abstract work, like I think that a lot of us were taught as kids that like the way to draw is to be able to draw something realistically. And it's really been kind of a shame that a lot of people stop making art after that sort of, they feel like they can't do that. And I feel like when kids draw and it's like very sort of free and abstract, or like even if they're trying to draw figurative stuff and it's not, it looks like totally kind of zany or whatever, I feel like that's the part of the brain that we kind of shut down, that like I am really interested in exercising that. So that's kind of like with this exercise too. I liked the idea of just like what lives in your subconscious thoughts and like just playing into that. I think like it definitely helps in terms of maybe like composition or just feeling comfortable picking up a paintbrush or a drawing tool. But I don't know if people would agree, but I do feel like they're kind of like two separate brains and like you can mix them together. But I also just feel like they can be totally exercised very separately as well.
Okay, so you talked about like when you were starting to sell work to kind of more strangers.
Yeah.
And I know you talked about kind of those blocks that you were getting, but were you really getting that like like that block of not knowing how to approach that?
Because I've also done a few commissions and I always get really nervous with commissions. And it's funny because they're coming to me for my style of art, but then I get so like caught up in if they're going to like it and what they're wanting from me. So that tends to also work against me sometimes. And yeah, I think it's just like when I really focus on like, are people going to like this? Is it going to sell? It's just almost just like a mental hurdle that like, stops me from creating what I really want to be creating. I also, what else was I going to say? I lost my train of thought, but it was something about commissions. But yeah, I try to like, what I was going to say is that a lot of times work that I hate ends up selling, which is another weird thing to wrap my head around because I'll often not even decide to put something out in a show, but then at the last minute decide to put it in a show. And then that's the first piece to sell. So it's a little bit also mysterious to know. So I think it's just trying to put the idea of selling out of your head when you're creating in general is like the only way really to do it. Did that answer your question?
It was kind of like, that's a good answer, but it was kind of more so of when somebody approaches you and says, oh my gosh, I would love to buy your work. Like, you get that kind of twisting gut check. It's like, oh no, sorry.
Like in terms of like, it's hard to let go of the work?
I guess it's more so like that internal like value system.
Yeah. Oh, like,
oh no, I'm an imposter.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely, I get what you're saying now. I definitely do. When I first started selling work, especially to friends and family, I would feel so bad. Like I would be like, no, you don't have to. You really don't have to. And still I have that feeling like if a stranger wants to buy a piece from me, I always kind of feel like, are you sure? Like you really don't have to. And they're like, we know we don't have to. So like, yeah, I have that where like, they're just like doing me a favor or something by buying my art. Yeah. I get that a lot.
How do you get over that?
I think just making more art and exhibiting more, and the more kind of people want to buy it, it becomes, okay, maybe people are seeing value in this. I think also just like going to other shows and seeing other people sell art and realizing that like there are a lot of people out there who want to own original art and who aren't artists themselves or aren't creating what you're creating. And so just realizing that what you are offering is unique to you and people actually want it. They're not just doing you a favor. Yeah.
What is your commission process? Because I imagine getting from the idea to the finished product has got to be quite a process, because somebody's not just handing you a photo and saying, please.
Yeah. So for my commission process, it is quite a process. I like, basically I'll ask them if there are pieces from my past work that speak to them, what their dimensions are, if there's a specific color palette that they have in mind or any specific inspiration. From there, I do actually do digital drawings because, again, maybe it's feeding into what you're saying, but like I'm always worried that someone's going to spend so much money, because my commissions are also more expensive. There's a lot more like custom work that is done. So I'm like, if someone's spending so much money on this piece, I want them to kind of know in advance what they're going to be getting, because they're putting a deposit down and this is a piece that's going to be probably large scale in their home. So I do digital drawings first and usually have like an option of 3 that they can choose from. But I really stress that this is just a sort of what it's going to look like. And this is just more for color placement and composition. And like really my work is about kind of those intuitive moments happening. So I try and let them know that like it's not going to look like the digital sketch, but this is going to give you an idea of kind of what we're working towards. I have had an issue in the past where having that digital sketch kind of holds me back from creating because I'm trying to make it look so similar. But I've found people that I've worked with have been great, and they're sort of like, yeah, we like this idea, but we want you to just kind of do your thing. And that just makes it a lot easier. So yeah, I have a bit of sort of that digital aspect, and then I start working, and then I will usually send photos and just say like, is there something that you want changed? Like sometimes people will say, oh, we wanted like more saturation in color, or we want a little more blue in this area or whatever. So I'll usually make those changes. And that's the process. Is that it? Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys.